Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to Crime Zone. Representatives from Arizona's Maricopa County Sheriff's Office say that they are searching for an escaped inmate this week after he was mistakenly released from jail while pretending to be another inmate. According to reports, the incident began at around 2:20 a.m. on May 12th, when a man named Anthony Pena was released from a local county jail. Pena had been booked into the facility on drug charges and for failure to appear in court, and was being held on a $250 bond. It turned out, however, that while officials had meant to release someone from custody that morning, it was not supposed to be Anthony Pena. Pena had managed to fool officials at the jail by pretending to be the inmate that was actually supposed to be released. Unfortunately for staff at the jail, this mistake wouldn't be realized until roughly 7 hours later, by which time Pena was long gone. Authorities have since released an arrest warrant for Pena and are now asking for anyone with information concerning his whereabouts to contact police. At the time of this recording, Pena remains at large, and officials say that they are conducting an investigation to figure out the full circumstances as to how he was able to fool staff at the jail and get released. Authorities in Chesterfield County, South Carolina, say that a wrong number landed a 31-year-old man in jail this week when the mix-up led to him unknowingly trying to sell drugs and a gun to a local sheriff's deputy. According to reports, the incident began sometime on May 9th, when 31-year-old Tondavian Wilson texted a number that he evidently thought belonged to a person that he was trying to sell marijuana and a handgun to. Pictures of the items were allegedly included in the texts, as well as prices for each. Unbeknownst to Wilson, however, he had texted the wrong number, and instead of going to his desired recipient, he had actually sent the messages to an officer with the local Chesterfield County Sheriff's Office. The officer replied to Wilson's texts, and after some back and forth, was reportedly sent an address in the town of Chiragh where they could meet up to complete the transaction. That afternoon, deputies arrived at the residence that Wilson had sent and found him in possession of 90 grams of marijuana, as well as the gun he was allegedly trying to sell. Needless to say, Wilson was quite surprised by the whole situation, having no idea that he had texted the wrong number. He was arrested to the scene and is now facing a number of charges, including possession with intent to distribute within proximity of a school/playground and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. Authorities in Orange County, California, are applauding the quick and decisive actions of members of a local church this week after they were able to restrain a shooter who opened fire on their congregation during the middle of an event. According to reports, the incident took place on the afternoon of May 15th at the Geneva Presbyterian Church in the city of Laguna Woods. At the time, about 40 members of the congregation, which consists mostly of elderly, retired Taiwanese immigrants, had just enjoyed a lunch at the church, which had been held as part of a celebration for their former pastor, Billy Chang. Chang was visiting the church after having moved to Taiwan 2 years ago. At around 1:25 p.m., while congregants were in the church's Simpson Hall auditorium taking pictures with Chang, loud noises abruptly broke out. Moments later, people realized that it was a shooter who was now firing randomly at them. The male suspect was armed with at least one handgun, though some reports state that it was two. Regardless, the terrifying attack continued until the shooter stopped to reload, at which point brave members of the church sprang into action. Chang was apparently the first to strike, hitting the suspect with a chair before several others jumped in to help. After tackling the man to the floor, they were able to disarm him and then hog-tie him with extension cords. Police arrived at the scene a short time later and were able to take the man into custody. At the time of this recording, few details about the suspect's identity had been released, though several reports we came across stated that he is an Asian male who is believed to be in his 60s that lives in Las Vegas. Sadly, despite the quick actions of church members to take down the attacker, several people were shot during the incident. One person was killed, while 4 others were critically wounded. One additional person sustained minor injuries, though these were apparently not from a gunshot. Unfortunately, little information is available about the victims at the time of this recording. However, we do know that they have been identified as 5 men and 1 woman, all of whom were of Asian descent. Their ages have been listed as 52, 66, 75, 82, 92, and 86. Authorities likewise say that they have yet to determine a motive behind the incident and are currently investigating whether it was hate-related. So far, however, it appears that the suspect had no known connections to the Geneva Presbyterian Church or any of the victims. The crime is still under investigation. Hey everyone, so we don't normally include edits like this, but we happened to catch this one after we had already recorded this initial segment and finished the video component, but before we uploaded the video. So we decided to add this little bit here for the sake of giving you all the most up-to-date information. On the afternoon of May 16th, authorities revealed the identity of the suspect in the Laguna Woods church shooting as 68-year-old David Chow. Chow is said to be an American citizen originally from China, and he is now alleged to have carried out the crime because he was upset about political tensions between China and Taiwan. The victim, who was fatally shot in the incident, has now also been identified as a 52-year-old doctor named John Cheng. Cheng was reportedly killed when he charged Chow during the incident to try and protect others. At the time of this recording, Chow remains in custody and has been charged with 1 count of murder and 5 counts of attempted murder. Officials say that they are still investigating and are currently trying to determine what, if any, additional charges to file against the 68-year-old. Authorities in Baltimore, Maryland say that they are on the hunt for 2 unknown suspects this week after a pregnant woman and her fiancé were gunned down in their car this week, leaving both of them dead and their newborn child in critical condition. According to reports, the horrifying incident took place on the night of May 12th, when 38-year-old Angel Morgan Heather Smith and her fiancé, Yamel Montague, were sitting in their car on the 300 block of East 23rd Street in Baltimore's Barclay neighborhood. As they attempted to park their vehicle just before 8:15 p.m., another car pulled up alongside them. Almost immediately after, the driver of the second car hopped out and began to shoot at the couple, while a second gunman also began to fire from the passenger seat. After firing several shots, the 2 attackers fled the scene in their vehicle. Though Yamel and Angel were rushed to nearby Johns Hopkins Hospital, sadly, the injuries that they had sustained were too severe for them to be saved. Adding an extra layer of tragedy to the situation was the fact that Angel was 7 months pregnant at the time. Upon arrival at the hospital, Yamel was pronounced dead almost immediately, while Angel managed to survive long enough to give birth to her baby boy. Sadly, the newborn is said to be in critical condition, and no updates have been given about his condition since initial reports were made about the incident. Understandably, the horrendous crime has sparked significant outrage in Baltimore, where family and friends of the victims, as well as community members more broadly, are demanding answers. Local officials say that an investigation is underway, though at the time of this recording, no suspects have been named in connection with the shooting. In the wake of the crime, a $16,000 reward was offered for information resulting in the identification of the 2 suspects, and authorities are now asking for anyone who might know anything to reach out to the Baltimore Police or Metro Crime Stoppers of Maryland. This week, representatives from the Office of the United States Attorney for the District of Vermont announced multiple charges against a 28-year-old man, who they allege is responsible for murdering both his mother and grandfather as part of a multi-year inheritance fraud scheme. According to reports, 28-year-old Nathan Carmen was arrested on May 10th and is now facing numerous charges, including first-degree murder and multiple counts of wire and mail fraud, in connection with numerous crimes he allegedly committed for the purpose of obtaining a sizable family inheritance. Authorities say that Carmen's crimes began in 2013, when he allegedly killed his grandfather, John Chakalos, at his home in Connecticut. John was found dead inside the residence after being shot 3 times in the head. Despite Carmen being a person of interest in the case at the time and having an obvious financial motive for the crime, investigators were unable to find sufficient evidence to prove their case, and Carmen was never charged. Instead, he received a $550,000 inheritance, money that had been left to him as part of his grandfather's large estate. According to police, despite allegedly getting everything he had wanted from the alleged crime, by 2016, Carmen had blown through most of his money. It was at that point that he reportedly turned his attention to getting the remainder of his grandfather's money, the $7 million that had gone to his mother, Linda Carmen. In September of 2016, Carmen reportedly convinced his mother to accompany him on what was supposed to be a fishing trip off the coast of Rhode Island, only for the two of them to disappear soon after setting out. When Carmen was found more than a week later by a commercial fishing vessel, he was alone in an inflatable life raft. He told investigators that his boat had capsized in a freak accident during the fishing trip and that he had been unable to save his mother. Understandably, Linda's death aroused suspicions, especially when witnesses came forward alleging that they had seen Carmen sabotaging his own boat before the fateful fishing trip. It was at that point that investigators began to believe that Carmen had deliberately made his boat unseaworthy in an attempt to cover up the fact that he had killed his mother for her inheritance money. Carmen tried to claim $85,000 in insurance money for the boat as well. However, based on the suspicious circumstances, that claim was denied, and it became part of the mounting evidence against Carmen. While it's unclear exactly what evidence authorities now have against the 28-year-old, it's said that this week's update is the culmination of a complex multi-year investigation. Carmen was taken into custody on May 10th in the town of Vernon, Vermont, where he moved shortly after his mother's death. He is now facing 1 count of first-degree murder, 4 counts of wire fraud, and 3 counts of mail fraud. According to a press release circulated by the U.S. Attorney's Office this week, Carmen is looking at a life sentence if convicted on the murder charge, and a sentence of up to 30 years apiece for each of the fraud charges. At the time of this recording, the situation is still developing. A story that is equal parts bizarre and disgusting was reported out of the city of St. Petersburg, Florida this week, where authorities say that a 57-year-old woman threw a bucket of urine on her neighbor after she became furious with him over his pet chicken. According to reports, the situation unfolded on the night of May 8th, when 57-year-old Christine Turman got into a fight with her neighbor Lawrence Stenzel at the Palm Haven Mobile Home Park. The argument allegedly began when Turman got frustrated because Stenzel's pet chicken had been, quote, pooping on her back patio. The dispute between the two neighbors escalated when Turman allegedly decided to one-up Stenzel in the war over bodily functions when she went inside, grabbed a bucket of urine, and proceeded to throw it on him. Stenzel responded by calling police, who showed up just after 10:30 p.m. and placed Turman under arrest for misdemeanor battery. While there, police also ended up arresting Turman's 59-year-old boyfriend, Kevin Avery, after he allegedly decided to threaten Stenzel right in front of the officers. According to reports, Turman has since been released from jail after posting $500 bond. As a final note, in case you were wondering, reports do not mention why Turman had a bucket of urine just lying around her house and apparently at the ready at the time of the incident, nor did they state whose urine was actually in the bucket. In what can perhaps best be described as a case of cosmic justice, authorities in Edgefield County, South Carolina, announced that a 60-year-old man had suffered a fatal heart attack this week while attempting to bury the body of a woman he had murdered. According to reports, the case began on May 7th when police were called to a residence on Tanglewood Drive in the town of Trenton with a report of an unresponsive man lying in his yard. When officers arrived at the scene, they discovered the body of 60-year-old Joseph McKinnon. McKinnon was lying near a large hole in the garden and appeared to have collapsed while doing yard work. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Because it appeared that McKinnon had died of natural causes, Authorities didn't immediately have cause to believe that there was anything more to the situation, and their priority became notifying the 60-year-old man's family. This included 65-year-old Patricia Ruth Dent, who, according to conflicting sources, was either McKinnon's wife or live-in girlfriend. However, police were unable to locate Patricia, and when they learned from her co-workers that she hadn't been reachable that day, attention turned back towards the Tanglewood Drive address. A search of the house showed signs that it had been freshly cleaned. However, traces of blood were also found. Eventually, investigators made their way out to the property's garden once again, this time performing a more thorough search of the area. When they looked inside the hole near where they had discovered McKinnon, they finally found Patricia's remains. She had been wrapped in black garbage bags and partially buried at the bottom. An autopsy reportedly filled in the remaining pieces of the puzzle. While McKinnon had died of natural causes, Patricia had been strangled. Based on this information, investigators concluded that McKinnon had murdered Patricia and had tried to cover up the crime by burying her in the garden, and at some point during this time had suffered a massive heart attack. While the exact motive behind the brutal crime may never be known, given the bizarre circumstances, authorities say that they are satisfied with the evidence they have uncovered. According to Edgefield County Sheriff Jody Rowland, quote, "Basically, this case is over." People across the United States are in mourning this week after a horrifying shooting at a Buffalo supermarket left 10 people dead and several others injured. According to reports, the incident began at around 2:30 p.m. on May 14th, when 18-year-old Peyton Gendron arrived at the Tops Friendly Market grocery store located on Jefferson Avenue in Buffalo, New York. Unbeknownst to those innocently going about their day, he was wearing body armor and a ballistic helmet and was armed with multiple firearms, including a semi-automatic rifle and a shotgun. He had come prepared to carry out an attack. After stepping out of his vehicle, Gendron began live streaming to Twitch, an online platform primarily known for video game content. As he walked through the parking lot towards the supermarket, the 18-year-old opened fire, killing 3 people and injuring a 4th. Upon making his way into the store, Gendron reportedly continued to shoot as many people as he could, as terrified shoppers ran for their lives. While reports seem to contradict each other as to whether it occurred outside or inside the store, at some point during the attack, Gendron was confronted by one of the supermarket's security guards, 55-year-old Aaron Salter. Salter, a former Buffalo police officer, reportedly exchanged gunfire with Gendron and managed to hit him. However, the 18-year-old suspect was protected by his body armor. Sadly, Salter was soon struck by one of Gendron's bullets and killed. It wasn't until police arrived on the scene minutes later that the carnage finally came to an end. At first, Gendron allegedly pointed one of his weapons to his chin. However, he then dropped the firearm and was taken into custody. In all, 10 people were killed during the unspeakable crime, and 3 others were injured. The deceased have since been identified as 32-year-old Roberta Drury, 52-year-old Margus Morrison, 62-year-old Geraldine Talley, 65-year-old Celestine Cheney, 67-year-old Howard Patterson, 72-year-old Catherine Massey, 77-year-old Pearl Young, 86-year-old Ruth Whitfield, 53-year-old Andre McNeil, and of course, 55-year-old Aaron Salter. Salter in particular has been praised as a hero by many in the aftermath of the attack, with authorities stating that even though he wasn't able to stop the shooter, his actions likely delayed him and saved lives. The 3 injured victims in the attack have been identified as 20-year-old Zaire Goodman, 50-year-old Jennifer Warrington, and 55-year-old Christopher Braden. Though the killing of 10 innocent people is awful enough to try and comprehend in any context, the case quickly took an even darker turn when investigators uncovered Gendron's alleged motive behind the shooting. According to statements he reportedly made once in custody, as well as a lengthy manifesto he posted online, he wanted to, quote, terrorize all non-white, non-Christian people and get them to leave the country. Investigators allege that in particular, Gendron intended to kill as many black people as possible when he carried out the crime, and took significant steps to make sure that this would be the case. According to reports, he chose the Buffalo supermarket as the scene of the chilling shooting, even though it was a roughly 3.5-hour drive from his home, because of the high black population in the neighborhood where it was located. Reports state that Gendron even showed up to the store the day before, disguised as a homeless person, in order to make sure that he had got things right. 11 of the 13 people shot by Gendron were reportedly black. As if all of this information wasn't hard enough to stomach already, reports further state that by the 18-year-old's own admission, it was initially his plan to drive to a second location to continue the shooting. He might have done so if he hadn't been stopped by police. While investigators say that Gendron was not on law enforcement's radar ahead of this week's shooting, reports have since been released claiming that this is not the first time the 18-year-old has been in trouble with the law. In June of last year, authorities were called to his high school after he allegedly made threatening statements suggesting that he planned to carry out a shooting there. While it appears that the incident was investigated and Gendron was brought in for a mental health evaluation at the time, following his discharge after a little over a day later, it's unclear what, if anything else, was done. Authorities say that they did not receive any calls or complaints about Gendron between the time of the June 2021 incident and this week's attack. Currently, Gendron remains in police custody and has been charged with first-degree murder, though additional charges are expected to come given the nature of the crime and its alleged motive. Though it has already been a couple of days since the heartbreaking incident, at the time of this recording, the case is still very much developing, as new information is continuing to pour out. As such, we've done our best to include as much as we can about the crime here. However, it's likely that small details will continue to shift in the reporting of the case as new details and other facts continue to emerge. That's it for this edition of Crimes of the Week. If you enjoyed our video, don't forget to like and subscribe to Crime Zone for more true crime content like this, making sure to hit the notification bell to stay up to date with our latest releases. Thank you for watching.